The classification of this is, the subphylum is Mucormycotina, and these agents are called as mucorales. So this, although it is rare globally, but in India, the incidence of mucormycosis is common, and especially during this post-COVID era, almost since February 2020, number of cases have increased exponentially. So the most affected, again I am repeating, the most affected individuals are poorly controlled diabetic, other may have metabolic acidosis, and immunocompromised patients. Now, when you say immunocompromised patient, that means those patients who are on long-term corticosteroid therapy, maybe HIV/AIDS patient or the patient on organ transplantation. Now, considering the mortality rate of mucormycosis, it is the mortality rate is very high and the range is very vast, from 30% to 70%, despite in advances in diagnosis and treatment also. Now, coming to the clinical spectrum of mucormycosis, there are 6-7 varieties of mucormycosis, out of which, of our interest as a dentist point of view, rhinocerebral mucormycosis is important to us. Other pulmonary, cutaneous, and gastrointestinal disseminated and isolated renal mucormycosis we may not see. So this is the rhinocerebral mucormycosis is the most common mucormycosis. Now, what are the major risk factors? Which patients are prone for mucormycosis? Number one, and very important, is uncontrolled diabetes mellitus in ketoacidosis. So 80 to 90% of rhinocerebral mucormycosis, they have uncontrolled diabetes mellitus or ketoacidosis. Other risk factors are deferoxamine therapy, iron overload, major burns in severe trauma cases, and protein allergy malnutrition. So these are the major risk factors. What are the contributory or other risk factors? Other form of metabolic acidosis. And the most important is treatment with immunosuppressive drugs, corticosteroids, antineoplastic drugs, organ and bone marrow transplantation. One more important risk factor is neutropenia and IV drug abuse and malignancies. So major risk factors are uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, treatment with immunosuppressive drugs, neutropenia, malignancies, and IV drug abuse. So coming to the etiology of mucormycosis, so varieties of phycomycetes causes this kind of fungal infection, out of which the common mucor is Rhizopus sap. So more than or equal to 70% of rhinocerebral mucormycosis are, the organism is Rhizopus. Others are mucor, rhizomucor, and then Succiniana, and so on. Now this organism is ubiquitous. Meaning of ubiquitous is it is present everywhere in the environment, on the fruits, vegetables, breads, everywhere. Meaning of ubiquitous. So yatra tatra sarvatra, हर तरफ है वो, कहीं कोई भी चीज नहीं छूटी है इससे. But it is always commensal. Unless and until your immunity is, as long as your immunity is strong, your immune system is strong, you are not going to get the disease. Now the infection mainly involves the lungs, sinuses, and the brain. We are talking about rhinocerebral mucormycosis. What is the pathogenesis? Basically, these fungal hyphae and the microorganism, they invade the major blood vessels, leading to ischemia of the subsequent part of the body, necrosis, and then the infarction of the respective tissues. As I said earlier, neutropenia is the major risk factor in mucormycosis. So neutrophil play a central role in the defense of the host against mucormycosis. Additional factor which enhances the growth of this microorganism inside the bodies are ketoacidosis, hyperglycemia, and hypoxia. Here, I would like to mention hyperglycemia, that is uncontrolled blood sugar level. These are especially seen in this post-COVID patient. The sugar were not monitored properly, or maybe due to lack of availability of the hospital beds. The sugars of the patients were, because they were homebound patients, so sugar was not monitored properly. Now, I told you major risk factor, one of the major risk factor is the ketoacidosis. So ketone bodies are the good food for the this kind of fungus, and also they decreases the inflammatory response and delays the polymorphs and the fibroblast response. Now, initially it was called as rhinocerebro-ocular mucormycosis, but nowadays the maxillary symptoms are also seen. So I prefer to call it as a RCOM, rhinocerebral ocular maxillary mucormycosis. What are the symptoms of, or what are the clinical presentations of these patients? So usually patient complains of unilateral headache, initial stages unilateral headache, especially behind the eye. They would complain of facial pain, eye swelling, that is proptosis, eyeball comes out of the globe, and visual disturbances, necrotic lesions on the heart, palate, and the nasal mucosa. You might get the nasal congestion, black discharge through the nose, symptoms of acute sinusitis like pain in the infraorbital region, sometimes epistaxis, and in the systemic factor, patient might get fever. Now, how we can divide this mucormycosis into the stages? So the disease progression occurs. So at stage 1, initially the spores of this fungus inoculated into the nasal mucosa, and subsequently they get the favorable environment and they are inoculated into the sinus. So patient will get initial symptoms of involvement of nasal mucosa and sinus, that is stuffiness in the nose and symptoms of acute sinusitis. When this subsequently starts invading the other structure adjoining the maxillary sinus, may it involve the other paranasal sinuses or in the orbital floor, patient goes into the clinical stage number 2, where there is orbital involvement. So the patient will get the symptoms of orbital involvement, and in the second stage itself, the patient gets the maxillary symptoms also. That we will discuss it later on. And in the stage 3, there is superior transmission of infection into the brain. So cerebral involvement is there, and as I told you, it spreads via the blood vessels. So these are the 3 main things by which intracranial spread of mucormycosis occur. That is, main is the ophthalmic artery, superior orbital fissure, and cribriform plate. It is a very thin plate seen in the base of the skull. Now, why I have mentioned here as a red flags, as a dentist, one should know what are the common symptoms or what are the common complaints of the post-COVID patient. So now, once this second wave is almost waning off, so you will come across such patients who are complaining of mobile teeth, bad breath, sometimes pain in the maxillary region. They may complain of ulcerations in the palate, multiple draining sinuses, sometimes paranasal sinus pain. Some patient may complain of stuffiness in the nose. Remember these 12, 14 points. These are very important when you are screening your dental patients to rule out the mucormycosis. You can examine the nasal mucosa. You might appreciate erythema of the nasal mucosa, facial erythema, sometimes black discoloration of the skin. In advanced cases, you might get periorbital erythema or edema, orbital pain, ptosis of eyelid, that is drooping of eyelid, double vision, and fever will be as a systemic symptom. Now, these are some clinical features which I told you. You can see the palatal ulcerations in the palate with the bare bone is seen. Now, in the second photograph, if you can appreciate, there is bulbous enlargement of the maxillary alveolar process as well as the gingiva. So, one might ask, what is the difference between so-called pyorrhea or periodontitis or this kind of fungal infection? So, first is all the major risk factors, history of COVID, and since it is a primarily infection of the maxillary sinus, it spreads through the floor of the sinus involving the alveolar process. Whereas the periodontitis, it starts from gingiva and then goes beyond. So that is one differentiating point. And this multiple abscesses which you can appreciate here, they are very rarely seen in case of periodontitis. So that is how one can differentiate between this kind of fungal infection and periodontitis. Same patient which is showing the palatal ulceration. Although it is said that the mucormycosis and the fungus primarily stays in the nasal mucosa and the sinus, in the last 7 days, we have seen a case of mucormycosis which was confirmed on histopathology in the mandible. So you can appreciate here, right? And this particular area. So mucormycosis has involved the mandible also. Again, these are the two different patients. So what I have seen in the last 1.5 months is in stage 2, when there is maxillary involvement, most of the patient, they have multiple draining sinuses. This is my observation. In this patient, the entire maxillary teeth were grade 3 mobile and you could move in all the teeth and the entire maxilla was moving. I don't know whether this video is playing. As I told you, in the clinical staging of rhinocerebral mucormycosis, stage 3, whenever there is orbital as well as intracranial involvement, it involves the centers, various centers of the cranial nerve, and patient may get facial palsy also. This patient has got a facial palsy, proptosis, ptosis, and cheilitis, right? And this patient, there was loss of vision due to involvement of the orbital contact. Some patients have been reported the acute atrophic type of candidiasis, which is very, I have seen the very first case of this in post-COVID patients. So atrophic type of candidiasis, some white flakes are seen. Now, how to diagnose this rhinocerebral ocular maxillary mucormycosis? We use 3 P's. Which patients are the possible patients? So those patients who have been treated for post COVID infection and had uncontrolled diabetes, history of corticosteroids, and the above clinical red flags which I had mentioned, the symptoms, that is mobility of the teeth, pain in the maxillary teeth, discoloration, epistaxis, nasal stuffiness. If all these clinical symptoms plus history of COVID and uncontrolled diabetes and administration of corticosteroids, and some patients were on oxygen therapy, these are the possible cases of mucormycosis. So to confirm these possible cases, we have to do some investigations like radiographic investigations, CT and MRI. And if the CT and MRI findings are consistent with the clinical symptoms, these cases become the probable cases of rhinocerebral mucormycosis. clinico-radiographically, if the case is proven, it has to be confirmed by histopathology and various markers. Once it is confirmed for the fungal infection, like it may be a mucormycosis or aspergillosis, so then the case is considered as a proven case of mucormycosis. So three things are important. One is the possibility, second is probability, and third one is the proven case. So you have to follow this diagnostic sequence. Now, which investigation would you advise? Both CT and MRI can be used as radiographic diagnostic aid. Both will detect the MRI will detect the fungal angio invasion, but bone destruction and tissue necrosis, soft tissue involvement, and intracranial involvement can be assessed in CT and MRI both. But for that, you have to use contrast media in case of CT. The sinus imaging, like especially the paranasal sinus imaging, might reveal the mucosal thickening, changes in the air fluid level, and if there is a cavernous sinus involvement, that can be appreciated in the paranasal sinus imaging. But one thing I would like to mention here, in advanced cases, MRI provides the better delineation of the blood vessels and intracranial extensions. Now these are the some CBCT scans which had come to my center for screening to rule out the possible cases into the probable cases. So the CT scan of the axial at the level of orbit, you can see here the orbital cell, you can appreciate the orbital cellulitis. Also, you can see the anterior ethmoid cells have been involved here. This is the coronal scan which shows that the right maxillary sinus is entirely involved, whereas mild thickening is seen on the left maxillary sinus. Osteomeatal unit is also blocked, and there is slight deviation of the nasal septum here. And in the coronal scan, you can appreciate the involvement of the ethmoid sinus also. Same patient, posterior section. This OPG also can give a brief idea about the maxillary sinus involvement, where you can see the air fluid level and the entire, both the maxillary sinuses are filled with the growth of the fungus. This is another patient which is showing the left maxillary sinus, almost left maxillary sinus is involved. Also the ethmoidal air cells. One can appreciate the inferior turbinate is enlarged on the left side. So these are the common features which are seen, which I have seen in many cases of rhinocerebral mucormycosis. Same patients, ethmoidal air cells which you can appreciate. Now here in the posterior slide, you can see the right side sinus also, it is involved. So it starts with one sinus and then progresses and starts involving the other sinus also. Here in the axial scan, you can appreciate nicely both the maxillary sinuses are fluid filled. Can you appreciate? Yes? Both the maxillary sinuses are fluid filled.
Yes.
Same patient at the upper level, at the coronal level. See the unilateral, this side, ethmoidal air cells are also have been involved. This is the sagittal section of the same patient where you can appreciate the maxillary sinus involvement. This was of left side. Also, you can see the sphenoidal sinus involvement here. Now, these are the few cases which I have shown. To confirm your probable mucormycosis cases into proven mucormycosis cases, you need to go for lab diagnosis. So tissue biopsy is the gold standard. It's considered as a gold standard. So you can have the tissue biopsy either through the endoscopic guided biopsy, or if it is involving the maxillary region, you can take the biopsy from that area. What you have to do is you have to divide the specimen into two pieces, and half of the tissue you have to preserve it in the saline for the fungal culture, and half of the tissue in the 10% formalin for histopathology. Now these tissue swabs through the nose, they are unreliable because errors are bound to occur. KOH mount is one of the tests to confirm whether this infection is fungal in nature or not, and you will get the immediate result in the KO mount. Although for the culture, it takes 2-3 days time or more time. Now, some biomarkers are available to rule out mucormycosis from aspergillosis, that is beta D glucon test and negative galactomannan test. Now, this is how on endoscopic picture this mucormycosis appears. Unfortunately, this video is not playing, but you can see the blackish discoloration of the nasal and the sinusal mucosa. So that is why it is commonly called as black fungus. Histopathologically, one can differentiate between the mucormycosis and aspergillosis. So this septae of the Mucorales species, they are non-septate and the branching is at right angle. You can see the right angle branching with the main cell. Whereas in case of aspergillosis, you can see the septations and the branching is at acute angle. Can you see the acute angle? Yes. Now, I would like to mention here that what are the do's and don'ts for the dentist. Number one, note down the patient's chief complaints related to the nasal cavity, maxillary teeth, nasal discharge, ophthalmic symptoms, which I had mentioned earlier. So that is most important. First is ask the patient chief complaint, and other which the red flags, which the 14 symptoms which I have mentioned, you have to ask the patient. You have to ask the patient. Also take the history of COVID-19 infection, whether the patient had been hospitalized, whether he was been given the steroids, that you need to ask. आप हर पेशेंट को उनके कोविड की जो भी दवाइयाँ दी गई है या हॉस्पिटल में उनको एडमिट किया हुआ था, उसकी फाइल लेकर आप खुद इवेल्युएट करिए. Also evaluate the file, discharge file. In the discharge file, everything is mentioned. So blood markers like ferritin, CRP level, blood sugar level. So all the three things. So mention the, ask about the chief complaints, history of COVID, hospitalization, steroid, then discharge file may show you some markers like CRP, raised blood sugar level, ferritin, that you have to evaluate. Evaluate the patient's oral cavity for all the symptoms and signs which I had mentioned, especially in the COVID-19 recovered patient. What are the don'ts? Avoid rushing into the extraction of mobile teeth, especially in the maxilla in COVID-19 recovered patient without complete evaluation. That is important. Avoid rushing extractions of multiple teeth in COVID-19 recovered patient without evaluation. Once the evaluation is done, if it has been ruled out, mucormycosis has been ruled out, then you can go. So don't be in a hurry. And if possible, if the intraoral draining sinus is present, collect the pus and send it for KOH mount. Within an hour, you will get a report, whether it is of fungal origin or other origin. One more important thing is always keep low threshold for diagnosis of mucormycosis. Can you hear me? Yes. So always keep low threshold for diagnosis of mucormycosis, meaning you should have high suspicion of mucormycosis in these patients COVID-19 patients with risk factors and red flag signs. As a dentist, you can take IOPA, OPG, and CBCT scan to confirm your suspicion, and this can be a good tool for screening of the patient. If required, you can take oral maxillofacial surgeon and ENT opinion in suspected cases. One thing I would like to mention here, there is no prophylactic antifungal therapy which is required as per ICMR guidelines, meaning with any of the antifungal medicine, you cannot avoid this thing. So there is, do not indulge into such practices that prescribing antifungal therapy. So basically mucormycosis is a disease which has to be managed by the team of ENT, maxillofacial surgeon, neurosurgeon, ophthalmologist, and intensivist in a hospital setting. So do not delay the specialist opinion and treat the patient with facial jaw related pain with antibiotic and analgesic therapy because they are fast spreading disease and time is of utmost importance. So as a dentist, whenever you are finding a patchy radiolucency and sinus obliteration in a diabetic and or post-COVID patient with a pain in the maxilla or maxillary teeth, you should rule out the possibility of fungal osteomyelitis and immediate action has to be taken to diagnose and treat the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bhaskar. It was a very informative for the dentists. Those who are like, we are not known to this mucormycosis, so it will help us a lot. Now I request Dr. Preetham to please introduce Dr. Naveen and request him to start his session. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunit sir. I am Dr. Preetham. I am privileged to work under Dr. Naveen sir. Most of us in and around Telangana, Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu know about Dr. Naveen sir, and most of the maxillofacial surgeons all around India know about Dr. Naveen sir. Those who don't know, I am giving a brief introduction of him. He has completed his MDS from GDC Nagapur. He has a vast 16 years of experience in maxillofacial surgery. He is a senior consultant to many big corporate hospitals like Omni, Medicover, Continental. He is currently working as a professor in Magna Institute of Dental Sciences, Nizamabad. He is a senior most surgeon and an expert opinion member among many discussion panels in maxillofacial surgery forums all around India. He is a honorable treasurer in Telangana State Chapter, Association of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgeons of India. He has operated almost around 15 cases in the past 1 week regarding mucormycosis in the last week itself. There are several things confusing about mucormycosis, like whether it is a white fungus or black fungus. And almost 20% of the patients population around us are post-COVID recovered patients. So they are having so many doubts that there is a pain in the orbital area or in the zygoma area. They are suspecting it is mucormycosis and rushing to us. And most of the questions are answered by Dr. Bhaskar Patel sir. With these queries in all of us, I request Dr. Naveen Kokla sir to share his vast experience and knowledge about mucormycosis, help us to understand the intricacies in early identifying and diagnosing the mucormycosis cases and how SAR is managing the cases. Thank you, sir. Dr. Naveen sir, over to you.
Thanks, Preetham, for the wonderful introduction. And I didn't expect this much introduction from you, but thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Post-COVID mucormycosis. The knowledge about mucormycosis is very less, and in the beginning stages only I can say, because mucormycosis is an old disease or infection, but very rare infection, which is we are seeing it very frequently. That is the saddest part of the disease actually. So once again, I thank Dr. Preetham, and also thank Dr. Sunil for giving me the opportunity to share my experience regarding mucormycosis, and on this platform of AAD, Asian Institute of Advanced Dentistry. So the topic is catch it early. So mucormycosis, catch it early. I would say that mucormycosis is a dreadful epidemic consequent to pandemic. So we all know that the pandemic situations which we are seeing now is already one of the dreadest one. On pathetic to see many people getting hospitalized, putting a lot of money to recover, getting a lot of medications, don't know what wanted, unwanted, and proved, not proved. We don't know much about COVID. Now again, this mucormycosis, which is also called as black fungus. Okay. So, how to catch it early is the situation. So, I would say someone has said nicely that post-COVID mucormycosis is putting a person from a frying pan into the fire. So very difficult for a person to really see him sitting in a hospital for a longer time, recovering from COVID infections, and now again going into the hospital with some more infection, which is not known to the many of the doctors how to treat properly. And in the present scenario of lack of medications, so it's becoming very difficult for the patient to get recovered, and also for the surgeons to really treat these patients. So very sad state at present in all over the country, and all, especially in Telangana, maybe other parts of the country also. So Dr. Bhaskar Patlisar has nicely given his diagnosis and his experiences in diagnosing the cases. So I would be little skipping regarding the diagnosis part and the initial introduction of mucormycosis. But just a briefly, I just wanted to go through what we see is a fungal infections which are affecting the human body, and what we know is regularly is the Candida infection, which we see in the oral cavity, in comparison to mucormycosis. Right, Candida is very frequently seen by many of the dentists. So, with the white patchy lesions, uh, which can be sorry, which can be treated with a small antifungal agents, or with a small one tablet, which is costing very less, and Candida cream, and increasing the immune system. Tinea ringworm, which we usually see as a skin infection, and aspergillosis like lung infection, which most of them have heard about. Now we are listening about mucormycosis, which is one of the rarest infections, now becoming very frequent. So I just wanted to share what is happening during SARS-CoV-2. Like what's happening after getting SARS-CoV. Some people are getting through nicely, comfortably, without any symptoms, being asymptomatic. They're lucky people, good, having good immunity. And some people are coming into the hospitals, getting treated and going away with a very short duration, maybe 3 to 5 days. Some people have to stay for a longer time, maybe around 5 to 10 days. And what's happening in them, or maybe for a longer time, maybe around 3 weeks, 4 weeks, putting a lot of medications into them. So this is because of the sepsis which has been created by the viral infection. Okay. So what's happening is, after the sepsis, it is creating or dysregulating innate immunity, and which is in turn decreasing the ciliary dysfunction in the respiratory epithelium. There is a cytokine storm in the lungs, and there is a inflammation. There's again, which is leading to microvascular coagulation, and eventually causing immune exhaustion. The person is becoming exhausted because the immunity of the person is getting used by the SARS COVID infection. Okay, and these patients are becoming very much critically ill, and could be subjected to very invasive procedures, like mechanical ventilation, CRT, ECMO, etc. Are they landing into BiPAP or getting into ventilators? Okay, with endotracheal intubation or oral intubation. Okay, and in some centers, what's happening is there could be, because of the workload, there could be poor nursing care of these patients, prolonged hospital stay, and use of lot of humidifiers, oxygen therapy, which could have led to the breaching of their immune system. So to completely come out of this infection, so what the hospital, the doctors, many of the people are doing is they are treating them with corticosteroids, which is a life-saving drug. Okay, not wrong about it, but what's happening is these drugs, some people are using it from the day one, which is not good. Maybe this is not indicated. Some people are rightly using it, but which in turn may be leading to hyperglycemia in that some cases, in a de novo cases, and or a patient who has already have diabetes along with the SARS-CoV infection, and use of corticosteroids in turn may be decreasing the immune response of the patient, leading to secondary bacterial and fungal infection. So, as most of you have been following the WhatsApp and other news which are coming into the paper, media, whatever media which is coming in, so you must have seen this chart coming in. So, I will not go through in detail, as already Dr. Bhaskar has gone through with this. I just wanted to put an insight on how the infectious is passing into the human body. Usually, this mucor, which is present in the body, are getting into the nose and landing up into the ethmoid sinuses and spreading to different parts of the body of the facial region, that is either into the other side of the maxillary sinus, ethmoid sinus, orbits. Just to represent this, I just wanted to share one video which I borrowed from Dr. Abhinand, who's one of the very good friend of mine. So in his latest presentation. So if you see this, so once the spores, these spores are already present in the environment, in hospitals, in air, and they when get it's inhaled. Usually, in normal person, if the because the good immunity level, it usually kills. The body usually kills these spores. But if the immunity is decreased, they regenerate. They grow in the form of hyphae, okay, which are accepted, which are characteristic for the mucorales, and they land up into the sinuses, most commonly into the maxillary sinus, then go into the ethmoid sinus, frontal sinus, and because of the thin bones which are present around the sinuses, they land up into different sinuses around frontal sinus and cavernous sinuses. The characteristics of this mucorales and mucor infection is they land up into the blood vessels, causing angioinvasion, that is through the vessels, and land up into, they cause endarteritis, and which in turn causes tissue necrosis, and as a result there is a hematogenous dissemination of the fungus throughout the body, and this sequence of events might be causing the mucormycosis, okay, the infection which is deadly. And Dr. Bhaskar has already told about the predisposing factor, but the which I consider the strongest predisposing factor for getting into mucormycosis is uncontrolled diabetics or hyperglycemia in an undiagnosed patients landing up into the hospital. So, just in brief, to go into the mucormycosis infection, the characteristics of mucormycosis infection, what I called as important virulent trait of mucus. It has an ability to acquire iron from the host, which is an essential element for its growth. In ketoacidosis, because of the free iron becomes readily available in the serum because of the increased serum, ferritin levels, along with use of corticosteroids and immunosuppressive drugs. This leads into an hyperglycemic state, and which patient might land up into mucormycosis. Okay, as Dr. Bhaskar has already told about different types, the most common or very much prevalent and seen mucormycosis infection is rhino-orbitocerebral mucormycosis. We can call it as now as rhino-orbito maxillary cerebral mucormycosis. So when we see the clinical condition of these patients, so if you see the patient usually looks very sick. So the patient might be having ptosis because of the orbital involvement, proptosis, the eyeball is coming out, there'll be chemosis, and there's an redness in the eye. There could be blackish discoloration in the skin if the skin is involved, if the usually on the cheek or on the nose. There could be facial palsy because of the edema on the swelling on the face, and there's a palatal ulceration which is seen in the oral cavity. So investigation part and CT scans are very helpful in this. That will end up into treatment principles. In these mucormycosis cases, most of the times we have to see or strictly check the glycemic control, because hyperglycemic state, as we know, that it decreases the immune response. And the most importantly, we need to give antifungal therapy, surgical debridement, which should be very aggressive, reversal of underlying predisposing factors, and adjuvant therapy. We can consider about hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So coming to them one by one, antifungal agents which we usually get is and which is the most important step or in treating mucormycosis are injection liposomal amphotericin B, which is most important and the best drug. It has to be given in a slow infusion, maybe around 30 minutes, in mixing with dextrose solution. If that is not available, we usually give injection amphotericin B deoxychelate, or if that is also not available, we have injection amphotericin B lipid complex. Previously, when liposomal was not there, the amphotericin B and deoxylate was given, but because of its nephrotoxicity, these antifungal agents are usually nephrotoxic. They have increased the serum creatinine levels, decrease, make there'll be difference in electrolyte imbalances, and decreased penetration of amphotericin into the hyphae. So to increase its penetration and to kill the fungus, liposomal, they have treated it and made a liposomal amphotericin B. Okay. So this has to be continued for approximately 10 days to 15 days, depends upon the reduction of the symptoms and seeing the host immune system. In some people, it has been extended for approximately 1 month, 30 days, and 15 days to 30 days also. And I know one patient, because the patient has come and the symptoms have not come down, and patient has to go for 3 surgeries. We had to give it for almost 2 months, and that is really a burden, because liposomal amphotericin, that was initial days, maybe around 4 months back. Okay, so but if you see 50 milligrams of amphotericin is costing approximately, depends upon the company, 3,500 rupees to 7,500 rupees. So if because this is not available, and per day, if the patient has to have a proper 70 kg body weight person, might be taking around 5 to 6 vials. So that comes to be approximately 30,000 per day. So that will be a huge burden on the patient if the continuation of the antifungals are for more days. So if after giving an amphotericin, we have to continue the tablet or injections called as posaconazole. This is considered to be the second line of drug which is more acting on this mucor fungus, and this has to be given as a 300 milligrams BD dose, which is an extended release tablet. Should be given maybe for 3 months to maybe 45 days to 3 months, depending upon the symptoms and the regression, and depending upon the immune response the patient is coming into. So we have other drug, if these are not available and if the patient could not tolerate these drugs, the one more antifungal drug which is considered to be effective on this patient is isavuconazole, which has to be given tablet 200 milligrams TID, or it is available in the form of injections also. And all these patients, when they are taking drugs, should be monitored for potassium, urea, blood urea, serum creatinine, serum sodium and magnesium. So if because this mucormycosis is considered to be an old infection, but because of this aggressiveness and not much knowledge in detail about this infection, so there's some guidelines given from the fungal infection study forum recently. It's on May 20th, 2 days back. So what they state is, in these cases, no antifungal prophylaxis is recommended. The reason is, most of the people in the surgical forum and the medicinal treatment, there's a discussion going on to prevent COVID patients landing up into mucormycosis. Why not give antifungal prophylaxis, which is which has been said, it has been condemned by this study forum. So, and they even said the combination of any therapy drugs could not be used, like other antifungal agents like fluconazole, voriconazole, these 5-fluoroacetyl could be effective in some other fungal infections, but this should not be is not active against mucormycosis. So coming to the surgical management of these patients require aggressive surgical management. It requires usually a multidisciplinary team. I put ENT instead of maxillofacial surgeon because most of these patients in the initial symptoms with the facial pain, they go to an ENT and then or a general physician. And then if there is a pain in the tooth or in the ulcers, they come to a dentist. So the first symptom which I usually see in these patients or here in these patients is the facial pain. So they have pain in the cheeks or the face because the first area which has been affected is the maxillary sinus or ethmoid sinus. So that could be a facial first symptom. And the other, if it is involving the orbits, we usually take help of ophthalmologist, and sometimes the infection, if not treated early, could end up into meningitis or involve the brain. Then we go take a help of neuro physician or surgery. Okay. And so coming to the surgical management, it is an early and which it should be done early and aggressive. Okay. In during these treatments, we can use transcutaneous retrobulbar amphotericin B to for good effectiveness of the drug. Endoscopic sinus surgery debridement should be done in an initial cases as early as possible, both clearing the sinuses, maxillary sinus, ethmoid, sigmoid, whichever are involved, along with the frontal sinuses also. If the lesion is entering into the maxilla, we have to go for maxillectomy. If it is involving the orbital floor orbits, then we have to go for debridement of orbital floors and zygoma. And if it is more extensive, then we might have to go for orbital exenteration or removal of the complete eyeball, and such that the patient might be without eye. That means in these cases, after surgery, patient will not be having the teeth, the jaw on either side or one side. The zygomatic prominence is not there, and the floor support for the eye is not there. And sometimes even patient might lose the eye. So coming to the different cases which we have operated, so we started operating mucormycosis, to be frankly speaking, in last December. So in during just post first wave of COVID, this patient is non-diabetic. He's just 39 years old, and he landed up into a nephrology unit in one of the hospital with acute kidney injury. So the reason is he was, after detailed case history, what we have seen is he was having occasional steroids because of rheumatoid arthritis, and went to a dentist for a simple dental pain, got a tooth extracted, and he had severe pain for which he used to take a lot of NSAIDs, maybe around 4 to 5 or 6 NSAIDs or tablets in a day, and that landed up him into acute kidney injury and in turn into the hospital. So if you see this, if you see the case intraorally, there's a small. When we have seen this patient for the first time, we could see only a small ulceration in the mid of the palate, but within a week's time, whole of the palatal mucosa got necrosed. Okay, if you see here, the gums are almost fine, but you have little bit of ulcerations here and the discoloration of the teeth, and the patient had mobility of the jaw. So then we planned for the complete resection of the maxilla and the Lee-Port 1 osteotomy. and removed whole of the maxilla along with the palate. If you see, this tissue appears to be a little blackish, necrotic completely without any blood supply. So this has been removed. If you see, this case is just 59 years old, diabetes since 8 years. So I'm just sharing some cases where we have thought doing the case simple maxillectomy leafwort could be okay, but he was in the same way. The patient, we have done bilateral maxillectomy from both the sides, removed the maxilla, and we put him on amphotericin. This is way back around 3 months before, where antifungal agents were available so comfortably. So once we call him for the checkup after a week, the patient was nicely discharged, and then we call him after a week. Then we notice that whole of the maxilla is again involved. We have checked him endoscopically. The bone is completely become necrotic. So then we have re-entered, given Weber-Ferguson incision. We exposed whole of the bone, whole of the zygoma, floor of the orbit. And if you see here, there's a little bit of difference in comparison to this type of the bone here. So we have removed whole of the floor of the infraorbital region floor. And now at present, 6 weeks, 4 weeks post-op, he's doing good. Sorry. Is Mr. Gopal, just 39 years old, 4 years diabetic. When he came to the hospital, his blood sugar was just is 400. The normal blood sugar should be less than 150, 160, depends upon the system which we see. So he came with a swelling which appears to be simple bacterial infections, but sorry, if you see intraorally, here the attached gingiva is little bulbous, and the free gingiva, there's some whitish tissue which is coming. So this could be an initial stage. We thought it could be an initial stage, or sometimes it represents even the bacterial infection. But what we have seen is the bulbous attached gingiva, which is not there here, form, which is in contradiction to the simple periodontal infections. So if you see the CT scan, we see that whole of the maxillary sinus is involved, and little bit of radiolucency on the zygomatic bone and the alveolar bone could be seen. Increase in the trabecular pattern is seen. So we have gone for the taken him for the surgery. So we thought just curating or removing little bit of the bone could be okay, but we landed up into segmental dissection of whole of the mandible. So this is the intra-op picture of the patient. We have removed whole of the mandible along with the zygoma and the floor of the orbit. And what we are doing nowadays is to check whether the maxilla is involved or not. First, we clear off whole of the maxillary sinus lining, and then remove a tooth. How much that tooth is involved? Okay, how much the alveolar bone is involved? If you see, a normal bone will be smooth, shiny, with good amount of vasculature coming in through the periosteal blood supply. But here we see there's a rough surface on the maxilla, and from inside here in the basal part of the alveolar bone, we feel completely necrotic, blackish, grayish black discoloration. That denotes whole of the maxilla is becoming avascular. So then we have gone into removal of the half of the maxilla. In these cases, in contradiction to cancer surgeries, what we see is we take a margin of approximately 1 centimeter or 1.5 centimeters to completely remove the metastatic tumor. But in these cases, mucormycosis cases or any infection stage cases, we try to remove whole of the maxilla which is moving. But we don't know how much extent the infection is. So we usually try to nibble and see that the healthy vascular bone is exposed, and remove the bone till we achieve vascular bone. But in that, sometimes we might have to leave the bone. That leads to recurrence. So you should be very judicious and meticulously see that whole of the bone is all necrotic bone along is removed, and we get a good healthy vascular bone. So that is about regarding the maxillary bone involvement, and these cases in mucormycosis rhino maxillary orbital mucormycosis cases, when the eyeball is involved, if you see, this is a good amount of conjunctivitis and chemosis which you see, and to retract, to open an eye, to see an eye, we have to really stretch hard the eyeballs to really open the eye. That is because of the restricted movements, because of the tightness of the orbit around the orbit. So usually these patients usually lose perception of the light, and there could be loss of vision in couple of days. So we should plan in such a way that remove the eye, do an orbital exantration so that the infection doesn't get into the meninges or cavernous sinus, and will not land up into mucormycosis of the brain. So all these cases, just we need to, what we have to see is we have to see the patients. Okay, we have to monitor the patient. So because if you don't monitor properly, this there could be a recurrence of the infection, and there will be an extensive involvement of the brain. Okay, so once they land up into brain, it's very difficult to treat this patient, because if some bone of the part of the bone is gone, we can't salvage the base of the cranium or any of the bones around the brain. Okay, so if this is the best part of monitoring these patients is by going for a nasal endoscopy. So if you see this nasal endoscopy, if you see here, this is the ENT surgeon has removed the lateral wall of the nose, or what we call the medial wall of the maxillary sinus, done removed the turbinates, the middle turbinates and the inferior turbinates. And when we remove it, so you can see a hyphae growing in. This is a blackish discoloration, grayish blackish discoloration into the maxillary sinus, opening of the maxillary sinus. Then if we see this, we need to completely remove this. And and if you see in this picture, we have, this is one more case where whole of the base of the skull is exposed, sphenoid sinus is exposed. This is the ethmoid sinuses, the posterior and the anterior one. These have been exposed and debrided, and this is the maxillary sinus which has been debrided with the maxillary sinus lining also. So I just wanted to share how the endoscopy looks like, because as a dentist, most of the people we don't look into. So just sharing an simple endoscopic procedure done post-operative for one of the patients. If you see here, this is an anterior ethmoid, posterior ethmoids, which is connected to the sphenoid sinus. This is sorry, this is the maxillary sinus. This is the posterior wall of the maxillary sinus, which is, there is no sphenoid. This is the zygomatic root of the zygomatic bone. If you see this video, this is the ethmoid sinuses, and this is the sphenoid sinus, which is nicely cleared off. This is through the nose. This is the posterior wall of the maxilla. The other monitoring aids are the MRI with CT with contrast, and CTPNS with contrast to check if there is any further collection. Okay, so these are things which have to be done every week, so that to prevent any infections. So what are my observations? If you see this in surgical in the present scenario, because it's very difficult to make a guidelines or protocols for treating these patients. So my observations here in this is, if the patient has a diffuse facial pain, then this patient would usually land up into endoscopic sinus surgery with medial maxillectomy, and along with medial and inferior turbinectomy, and need to have a cardiac surgery done to observe any grayish black discoloration on the base of the floor. Okay, so if to evaluate whether the patient lands up into maxillectomy or not. If the patient has toothache or tooth mobility, patient, all the cases will require sinus endoscopic surgery, maxillectomy, either unilateral or bilateral. And if the patient has pain in the orbits and there is an extension into the This is an MRI of one of the patients where this fungus growth is seen in the orbits. So this is the fungus growth. And if you see here, this is the normal orbit and the eyeball, and see here, this eyeball is shrunken and just has a proptosis, and there's a collection in the medial wall of the orbit. So these patients this is a post-operative surgery where whole of the sinus has been cleared, the ethmoids has been cleared, but still the patient has a collection of hyphae or mucor into the medial wall of the orbits. So this patient requires orbital exsanteration. So depending upon seeing the clinical findings, when a person sees this type of necrosis or ulcerations, we have to definitely go for maxillectomy, unilateral, along with removal of all pterygoids and complete high-level maxillectomy, and check if the orbits are involved or not. And if this type of sinuses or swelling is seen, then patient has to land up into maxillectomy, partial or complete, because these cases might land up into contralateral side of the alveolar bone. Here, if you see an ulceration in the mid palate, this is also one of the characteristic seen where the ulcer which is seen when the septae of the nasal septum is involved and vomerine bone or cribriform plate is involved. This mandates complete maxillectomy, because when the mucormycosis is involving this middle in the midline, so both alveolar bones might be involved. So we are seeing cases that we might have to go for classical Leaford one osteotomy and remove whole of the maxilla. So I just wanted to show you how this fungus looks like when the teeth are removed, how devascularities. So most of the cases, if it is an extensive surgery, extensive case of mucormycosis, whole of the maxilla is mobile. But here, if you see an early stages, after extraction, if you see there's an avascularity seen in the interradicular interdental bone. This socket is completely white and whitish to pale color without any discoloration, without any blood supply. If you see here, this is completely blackish. Okay, this is the sign where we call this mucormycosis as black fungus, because it makes it more completely black. So how do we prevent this? These are the simple. How to prevent mucormycosis? Already has been discussed, but just wanted to highlight some things. Always use sterile or distilled water in the hospital humidifier if possible. Try to have a strict glycemic control. Optimally use steroids in treating COVID patients, because we are dealing with mucormycosis post-COVID. Okay. And for most of us, the surgeons or dentists do not consider all the cases with blocked nose as case of bacterial infection, which are nowadays not seen, which we usually see before. It in the present context of immunosuppression and COVID-19 infections. Take a message from surgery point of view. Fungal rhinocerebromaxillary orbital infection, which is primarily a disease of the sinuses, secondary to the orbit, maxilla, and brain. Mucormycosis is not a black fungi. It is not contagious. It is not spread between one person to the other person. And if the patient has come out and has tooth mobility and like of post-COVID, then check his IL-6 serum ferritin levels and HbA1c levels. If they are positive, you can think about mucormycosis. Take precautions and inform them beforehand to take proper precautions. High dose and early treatment of steroids or immune modulators or mechanical ventilation, check them prior and consider for mucormycosis. If a patient has taken tocilizumab, be aware that this patient might be landing up into mucormycosis. Avoid prolonged use of broad spectrum antibiotics, which we usually sometimes do in practicing dentistry. And if just check about because all the signs are usually seen, some might be in the beginning stage, some might be in advanced stages. But what I see in a regular dentistry, if you have a bulbous gingiva type of or periodontal infections, if you see any multiple sinuses, if you see any tooth mobility, And if the patient has a diffuse pain in facial region, it could be mucormycosis. Be careful in diagnosing. Don't jump into any simple bacterial infection in present scenario. So this is about the mucormycosis, and most of them might be asking how to go for rehabilitation. These are some of the pictures depicted and given by one of my friends, Shravan Kumar, for patient-specific implants. This could be in future if the patient is doing good, and we can salvage uh, as less as possible. Hope we will not reach this stage. This is a painting which has been depicted on 1962. Okay, life in 2022. Hope it doesn't come to this stage because of increased vaccine um, coming in. Stay safe, stay home, be happy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Naveen.
Thanks, Dr. Sunil.
It was a very wonderful, informative session. Can you please take up few questions, because few participants have mentioned it in the chat box. You can just open the chat box and see the questions.
Yes, yes.
Dr. Santosh Chavan has asked, sir, what will be the signs and symptoms of mucormycosis in mandibular arch? He said.
Right. In the mandible, actually, I have seen one case where patient had not patient didn't have fungal infection as such, but patient had landed into a bacterial infection with a bacteria called as Enterobacter cloacae. This is also an opportunistic infection which is rarely seen. So at the end, and some of my friends have seen mucormycosis in mandible also. In the symptoms would be the same: bulbous gingiva. The initial symptom could be an bulbous attached gingiva and multiple sinuses, draining sinuses. It looks like uh, pus coming out, but it will be it could be mucor, because you need to see the history. So that is the main important thing, and all the signs and symptoms will be same. But in these cases, in the late stage, you can say that blackish discoloration and loss of mucosa. And sometimes, if it is an advanced stage, then you might have sinuses coming out through the skin also, because there will be less pathway towards in the maxilla. You have a pathway towards going into the cavernous sinus upwards, but in the mandible there are less chances going. If it is going, it is going to submandibular space. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Naveen, actually, you can mention your mobile number in the chat box, so that if they have any further questions, they will contact you. But there are many questions coming up in the chat box. You can just see, and if you find it any relevant, then you can please answer over here. If it's a very common asked question. Like Dr. Praveen
In
asking,
extenteration, what is the posterior limit for dissection? In extenteration, what we see is only the optic nerve. Just optic canal is the posterior limit. That's the extent we usually go. Clamp the uh, contents and optic vessels and tight, and remove the eyeball. What are signs of mandibular arch? Yep. I already answered, Santosh. Yep. Sai Krishna sir, after how many days we will see the development of mucormycosis in post-COVID patients in the maxillary arch? Yep. So that's a good question. Actually, maybe I was expecting this could be. We have seen patients on 10th day mucormycosis to 10th post-operative day also, and some might be seeing cases maybe of post-COVID after 14 days. But the isolation period for COVID is 14 days, 14 days, and what we consider the transmission, or the RT-PCR usually comes negative after 12 days. But uh, we have seen patients coming to our OPD post 15 days also. So what I think in particular is mucor might be getting started because of the vasculitis or immune exhaustion which has been created by COVID itself. And maybe after use of 3 to 4 days of steroids also, there could be chance that mucor is getting into the patient and landing into mucormycosis, and they come after 14 or 15 days or maybe around 20 days post first symptom into the OPD with aggressive lesion, aggressive involvement of macular sinus, maxilla, or orbits. It could be even 10th day or maybe 15th day. So what clinical consideration should be taken in case of mucormycosis? Dr. Bhaskar would like to answer this.
What clinical considerations? What is
Sir, what clinical consideration should be taken in case of mucormycosis?
See, I have already discussed in do's and don'ts.
Yes,
Again, I will share it. But the first thing is, whenever patient comes to you with the post-COVID history, always ask for the chief complaints, which I had mentioned in the red flags, various 14 symptoms. Also ask for a history of hospitalization, oxygen support, and immunosuppressive drugs. Second is examine the oral cavity and look for any unexpected mobility, multiple draining sinuses. Third one is do not rush into the extraction of mobile tooth unless and until it is fully evaluated. Number 4 is it is not contagious. Someone had asked, is it contagious? So it is not contagious. And for one question was there for early diagnosis of CT scan, whether it is CT scan or MRI. CT and MRI will give you the probable diagnosis. On the basis of CT and MRI, you can see the extension of the lesion, but early diagnosis confirmation has to be done by the biopsy. So always go for the checkpoints. Whenever patient giving history of COVID and unexplained pain in the facial region, mobility of the maxillary teeth, multiple draining sinuses, and do not go on prescribing the antibiotic and analgesic therapy for the maxillary pain or mobility, right? Early is to have an assessment done, and better is to confirm the case and refer to the higher center, maybe ENT surgeon or maxillofacial surgeon. I hope he got the answer.
Right. Yep. So one question is I think Monica Sharma got the answer. So any clinical correlation you're reusing mask and black fungus, sir? So may or may not be. It's very difficult to say reusing mask. So any mask which has been reused without washing, and so what happens is there's a lot of dust in, and the dust contains mucus. So there could be black fungus coming in through unwashed, untidy mask. But N95 mask, which should be used judiciously, it can't be washed. It has to be properly sterilized under UV light. So if possible, use N95 mask with or double masking. That will be helpful. But don't use untidy mask. So is it contagious? No. It is airborne. Definitely mucormycosis is present in the environment. It is definitely airborne.
Dr. Manish,
Recurrence of mucormycosis is huge, invasive, very much recurrent. Proper debridement, aggressive debridement is required. Then only the chance of less recurrence. Secondly, role of antifungals are most important. We are using antifungals. That is a primary medical treatment or the treatment. Surgery is to reduce the burden on antifungals. Surgery is not the main thing. Surgery is just to reduce the burden on antifungals treatment. So at present scenario, because of decreased or production of antifungals in the country or all over the world, it is becoming very difficult to treat the patient. So the chances of recurrence could be on a higher side now. maybe if the medications coming in are more, there could be less chances of recurrence, hopefully.
To Dr. Bhaskar, one question is like Dr. Vijay Kumar, he has asked, I felt CBCT or MRI is as good as CT or MRI in the diagnosis as contrast resolution is of limited value in sinuses. So what you are saying this?
Yes, it's a very good question. See, there are three modalities. One is the CT scan with contrast, MRI, and the newer one is the CBCT scan. As a dentist, when you suspect anything like early mucormycosis or any changes, first step is to go for the screening.
I think Dr. Bhaskar got disconnected, some net connection issue with
Radiography, maybe CT scan or OP, help in the screening of the patient, and it will definitely help in the understanding the extent of the lesion. Along with that, CBCT has got a less radiation exposure as compared to the CT scan, almost 80% less than the conventional CT scan. So as a dentist, one should go for the screening radiograph first, maybe OPG or CBCT. And if it says that it is the large extensive lesion,
And one more question, how zinc level are related to mucormycosis?
pardon, there is one question, is it seen in hospitalized patient only or can be seen in asymptomatic COVID-19 patients too? Now, see, all the hospitalized patient may not get mucormycosis, or all the home care patient may not get mucormycosis. What you have to see the risk factors, whether the patient is immunocompromised, whether he has been given corticosteroids or immunosuppressive drugs, whether his blood sugar was under control or not. These are the three important factors as far as the mucormycosis in COVID patient is seen, right? So not all the hospitalized patients will get mucormycosis, neither this asymptomatic home care patient. In fact, what I have seen is the home care patient who had been prescribed corticosteroid, and maybe because there were no beds in the hospital, they too got the mucormycosis. Over to you, sir.
How zinc levels related to mucormycosis? Is some new hypothesis is coming up?
See, there are no studies which can prove, but now it is going on social media that the excessive zinc is having some relation. Let us wait for some studies.
Actually, there was an article which is already there in 2013. Can I come in? Sorry, just to interrupt. That zinc, actually, this is not known to me also before this morning, but zinc, presence of zinc initiates or enhances the growth of mucormycosis is the relation which has been already given in an article of 2013. Okay. But we don't know because mucormycosis usually doesn't deal much. So that's the reason we usually don't know. So what it states is that chelator, zinc antidote like cleoquinol and phenethrolone also, presence of that decreases the mucor growth. So presence of zinc increases the mucor growth is the study which has been already conducted. But see, because it's a new disease, old disease with a new variants and aggressiveness, so we'll be knowing much more now. Hopefully. Confirmative test for black fungus, as we have said already, we need to. If you have seen any swelling pus, just take that pus in a sterile swab, send it in saline because you usually don't have KOH solution. So send it to the any diagnostic center near you and put the diagnosis as could be probably mucormycosis, and they will do testing and they'll just put it on cured solution and check on the slide under the microscope. So within 1 hour, hopefully your report should be there. That will be an initial diagnosis, and that will be almost confirmatory. Second confirmatory or the best diagnosis is going for a fungal histopathology. So just remove a little bit of tissue, soft tissue, or in the attached gingiva or the vestibule if you find any swelling, and or pre-gingiva, and send it to the histopathology. Within 3-4 days, hopefully you should get the report, and that will tell you mucormycosis.
Is
Culture is very difficult to get. Sometimes you may get negative results. Yes.
is the fungal prophylaxis recommended or not to prevent this mucormycosis?
Prophylaxis, as I already told in the presentation, antifungal prophylaxis is not recommended by any of the fungal, like there's a forum for fungal treatments. So it has been not recommended. And secondly, what I say is, if there is there is no fungal infection already in the patient, and when we give to any person, so that has to go and metabolize in the kidneys. So if there is no use, and when the kidneys are being stressed upon, they might land up into secondary pathology of kidneys or some other problem. So why to use an prophylaxis which is nephrotoxic and could be problematic for the patient? I don't recommend, or most of the people don't recommend antifungal prophylaxis.
Any further questions to be answered? I think Dr. Naveen and Dr. Bhaskar have answered almost all the questions from the chat box. So, so if any further questions, the contact numbers are mentioned in the chat box. You can please note it down, and you can do the personal message to the Dr. Bhaskar Patle or Dr. Naveen Kokila. I'm just entering the numbers again into the chat box. It's already given in the chat box also, so it will be there with you. So I'm very thankful to Dr. Naveen and Dr. Bhaskar to give your valuable time on this Sunday evening and make it very useful and informative at such times, such difficult times for the dentist. And it was a completely, mucormycosis was not a routine topic or a very rare topic where we have heard of a small para and somewhere in the Schaefer's, but now it is become a very big picture. I hope this session will help many of the dentists to diagnose the cases early. Thank you very much, Dr. Naveen. Thank you, Dr. Bhaskar, and all the participants for listening to it very patiently. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Sunil, for giving the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you all. I'm just ending this meeting. Thank you very much.